I am here at the Women's Summit this evening to talk about passing LGBT affirming policies in local school boards. We have to do this fight school board by school board since Richmond hasn't been able to pass these policies statewide, but hopefully they will do that in the 2020 General Assembly session. And I missed the first Women's Summit, and I was really sad to miss it. And I came last year, and I had a whole bunch of fun. And it's great to be around so many awesome people who are doing really important work and maybe in different issues. Because, I mean, we all got a lot of issues, but you got to use your time strategically. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here. All right, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Charlotte McConnell. I am on the steering committee for Equality Loudoun, and I help to organize this. We have Loudoun County School Board member for Broad Run District, Joy Maloney, joining us tonight. We're also joined by Evelyn Brumar. You're in Equality Prince William. And Robert Rigby, I always want to say Robert Rigby Norris. Robert Rigby from Fairfax County Pride.
Fairfax County Public Schools Pride.
There you go, Fairfax County Public Schools Pride. We're going to be discussing how you can pass LGBT affirming policies in your school. And I just wanted to say that we had quite a struggle in Loudoun County. I guess we're the most recent county to pass policies, but I think we'll start off first hearing from Robert, because I think you were among one of the first counties to pass policies,
we
right?
were among the most recent first. So people have been advocating for LGBTQ people in Fairfax County for 2.5 decades before I came along. Back in the 90s, they were advocating to have the Washington Blade in their public libraries and have LGBTQ inclusive family life education. And that was a big fuss. That was a big fuss. Not to be partisan, but the Fairfax Republicans and some anti-LGBTQ, and I'll go ahead and call them hate groups, got involved. The Family Research Council, the Family Foundation, the Traditional Values Coalition, but they got that through. In 2001, we started advocating that they add sexual orientation to their non-discrimination policy. Big meetings, ugly meetings, lots of talk about bathrooms. We weren't talking about trans people at the time, but there was fear that I would go in the bathroom, that the gay boys would go into the bathroom and showers and stuff. That did not pass. We asked the Attorney General, who was Jerry Kilgore at the time, whether school boards had the right to do that, and he said no. So the Fairfax County School Board said no. Over the years, we had other things come up. There were efforts to knock down gay straight alliances, to make all student clubs be parent permission only, which would have killed GSAs. There were efforts at the state level to do that, and it got killed in Senate committees every year, barely. So we fought that. There was a school board member spreading stuff about the parent therapy. We fought that. Until in 2015, in 2014, marriage became legal in Virginia. Not 2015, not the over-death decision, but before that, marriage became legal. And Fairfax immediately added sexual orientation to its non-discrimination policy with the explicit reason of accommodating same-sex married couples who wanted benefits. And then the Attorney General of Virginia, Mark Herring, this time, in March of 2015, said that counties can add sexual orientation and gender identity to their non-discrimination policy. And the Fairfax County School Board the next day started the process of doing that, expecting to do it quietly, just like they had sexual orientation. And the Traditional Values Coalition got involved, and the Family Research Council, Fox News, Red Bayer, several different groups, and unfortunately the Fairfax County Republican Party got behind it. So there was a meeting with about 450 screaming people, assaults, people diagnosed screaming. They passed it. They passed it. We were falling over ourselves trying to get people there. We weren't organized, so we only got about 60 people there. After that, we organized FCPS Pride, Fairfax County Public Schools Pride, with the intent of organizing networks to support the school board when things like this came up. We reached out, there are 6 LGBTQ organizations in Fairfax County. So we reached out to them, but we also reached out to the teachers unions. We have 2 teachers unions, the NAACP, which the president of the NAACP said to me, Robert, your struggle is our struggle. They're there with us. The teachers unions, some Latinos organization, NACASEC, which is an Asian American organization, various groups, and gathered our forces. And then if we really need them, we call on the Fairfax County Democrats to come. So now we can turn out about 250 people. Now we can turn out about 250 people. We've also worked with the superintendent. FCPS Pride is an employees group, or an official employees group. Our membership also includes many community members, parents of trans kids, LGBTQ members, but we're an official employees group, so that we get access to the superintendent and all the employees meetings there. And we work a lot behind the scenes. We met with the superintendent and equity this week, working on implementation, because policy is great, but it comes down to implementation. And implementation in Fairfax is hard. Now, Arlington, I think how am I doing?
You're almost out of time.
Okay, Arlington quietly passed the non-discrimination policies, but a group of parents of trans kids over the last year got together, many of them stealth as a secret group to meet with the school system and get implementation, detailed regulations that spell out bathroom access, gender-neutral bathrooms, overnight trips, locker rooms, training, all of that, which no one else has. Arlington, as of July 1st, will have that. Stafford is going to vote on non-discrimination on July 16th. Stafford will vote on July 16th. That's 3 counties all over.
Thank you, Robert.
So when I first moved to Virginia, my wife and I weren't allowed to adopt our foster child, and we couldn't get married. And when we wanted to buy a house, we became aware that we could be denied housing. So when we finally got a house, we looked up who our representatives were, and all of our representatives were anti-LGBT. So we knew that we were going to be in for a fight. And I've been fighting all my life for my equality and for my rights to exist. And so why would it be any different when I moved to Virginia? And so this is why it's important, because I want to make sure that future LGBTQ youth, when they come out, it's a safer place for them to come out. They don't have to go through what I went through, which is being disowned and homeless and being denied basic human rights, and make it easier for them to be very valued citizens in the community and also contribute more than what maybe society doesn't want. So in our county, in 2015, we were trying to pass a non-discrimination policy for our staff and students in our school system. What happened was a delegate at that time was adamant that it wasn't going to happen. So he bussed in a bunch of Catholic kids from a private school and all these Christian and Catholic parents to come and speak against the policy being proposed to include staff and students. And we thought that it wouldn't be a big issue because the majority of the school board was leaning towards passing these policies. But because of that show of force, it made them double think. Also, there was a couple people on the school board that were leaning that way, but didn't lean completely that way. So they wanted to give them more time to think and debate it. When we found out that that was happening, that there wasn't even the kids from the public school system wasn't even allowed to be there and speak because they brought all these kids from the private school system, which weren't going to be affected by the policies anyways, to talk about, oh, well, today I feel like I'm going to be a boy, so I'm going to go to the boys' restroom, or just this obnoxious stuff, just to stoke fear in other students and other parents that were there. it became a fight. And so that first initial meeting that they had, it was a sea of red shirts. And the next time that the school board met, it gave me the opportunity to meet with a couple of the teachers and also school board members to actually sit down and talk to them about being LGBTQ. Because the two swing votes that were there have never known anybody from the LGBTQ community. And it was just shocking to me that how if they would have just initiated a conversation, how a lot of their fears would have been put away, and that they would have noticed that my wife and I and our adopted daughter in this public school system, we're not going to do anything ill to the kids or to the staff, that we, just like them, wanted to have a good quality of life, give good quality education, a safe place for our daughter, and that we, when we go to the school, would feel like that we can talk to the teachers and that we were going to be discriminated against, and that our friends that work in the school would also be protected. That it took building a relationship to have them be able to vote yes on that. So when we did show up, it was, I don't know, maybe like 10, 15 people in red shirts, and the rest of everybody that was in that room was all purple shirts. And there had been a couple hundred, no, I don't know, like 400 people that showed up. It was quite full. We even had local organizations show up. We even had a church bring their choir and sing in the front, you know, to show about how inclusive it is and the right thing to do. It was a community thing, and that was what helped push that policy, the non-discrimination policy. But it didn't include gender expression. It only includes sexual orientation and identity. So our trans kids are still subject to a little bit of discrimination through our school systems in Prince William County. Our funding for our school systems comes from our Board of County Supervisors, and it's no surprise there that Board of County Supervisors are pretty homophobic. So last year I worked really hard to pass LGBTQ Pride Month, and it took a lot of the same thing that I did with the school board, but these weren't supportive supervisors. They were, some of the supervisors I met with are homophobic, and some of them were moderate Republicans, but they just didn't want to put themselves out there. And the same thing about getting to know them and building a relationship and talking about what, you know, it's not a political issue, it's not a right or a left thing, it's a human rights issue. They became a little more warm to the idea of passing the appreciation LGBTQ Pride Month. And with that, it let the rest of the school system feel comfortable about being a little progressive about allowing GSAs and at the schools, and actually having staff that would never have stepped up to sponsor a GSA at their schools to step up and do that. So with passing that, it implemented also an opportunity for kids to have a safe place to meet and hang out after school with people who support kids who support them as well. Same thing this year. We passed. It was a fight to pass it this year because it comes down the line, and so it starts with their supervisors. We passed it this year with their supervisors again, but that was a fight. Our next step is to go back to our school board, ask them to include gender expression. And hopefully next year we get it down from, you know, the House of Delegates and our senators, pass a whole statewide non-discrimination policy. Because if they pass it, then there's no real reason why we have to keep fighting these small little battles for their school systems and our counties and our city councils. I mean, we could just start protecting our staff, our students, and our residents. There's only 2 counties in the Commonwealth that actually have passed non-discrimination protection policies. That's Arlington and Alexandria. Nowhere else in Virginia and our Commonwealth has done that. We were talking about the other schools that have passed it. Not all our schools have done it. It should be an automatic. It shouldn't be like some kids are protected and others aren't. And so, but what it does is it initiates a conversation, especially people who have LGBTQ kids in the school system or that want to be employed by the school system to get involved in. That's the thing. This is the starting process about talking about it, knowing what your school board has in protection, knowing what your county has in protection, knowing what you can do about it, which council members, which supervisors, which school board people you need to talk to. Is it because of fears? Is it because of religion? Or is it because of lack of courage? Or is it because of just you don't know anybody that's LGBTQ? Because just having that relationship and that connection can do so much for giving people courage to take that step forward, that just don't want to be inclusive because they don't want to look bad against their constituencies, but giving them that support. I know we want to be angry and all up front with our signs and stuff like that, but sometimes just giving that support from behind the scenes is enough to get them to be courageous to actually be inclusive. And that's our fight in Prince William County right now.
Thank you, Evelyn. Joy, would you speak about what it was like on the other side as a school board rep?
Sure. So I've been on the Loudoun County School Board since 2015, and I think it was that first year we had a policy come up, our non-discrimination policy for employees, and it came out of committee with adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the protected classes. And it came up for a vote, and it failed 4-5 vote. And at that point, I think people were surprised in our county that happened. So I know Charlotte worked with some of the old stalwarts who had done Equality Loudoun and restarted it, reinvigorated it, and they continued to show up monthly to our meetings to remind the board that they made this wrong decision. And in the meantime, I would always kind of try and feel out whether or not any of the other board members were changing their opinions, but it didn't seem like it was happening. Fortunately, one of our most conservative members resigned and vacated his seat. And so we had the opportunity to appoint a new member to replace him. And by stroke of luck, the person who, the people that were against the LGBTQ affirming policy, their chosen candidate, I suppose, was not able to put his name forward at the last minute. And so they were left with pretty much no choice but somebody who was going to support this policy. Otherwise it was going to be, some very non-qualified person. So that's what happened, and three very strong candidates, all women, basically all stated that they were for this policy when they were asked about it. And so we knew that we had the votes at that point, once we had appointed someone. So we immediately got a different policy. Instead of starting with employees, we started with our foundational policy and just made a flat out, we don't discriminate policy that included sexual orientation and gender identity, got that out of committee, voted it, and then said, as part of this vote, we will now have to go through our other policies and fix them. And so 2 of those policies are in committee now. One is the employee policy. That's in our HR committee, and I would expect that to come out of committee probably in August. And we just have the bullying prevention policy come in from the committee that I'm on, the student support and services. And I expect that we're going to have the same kind of situation that you were talking about in Fairfax, where we have some very engaged transgender parents, parents of transgender children. And I feel like what's going to have to happen is them getting with staff and really crafting regulations that will implement this properly. Right now, there was definitely concern on the staff. Like one of the ways on the school board that you can try and get things done is to work the staff, like to try and get them to say that this is what we should do. And I was trying that, and I was getting a lot of pushback. And so I'm still concerned that maybe staff isn't fully on board, but I know that we have certain allies on the staff. And so, and our teachers union as well, the Loudoun Education Association, I know we have allies there. So I think it's just going to be a process of getting everything done, but we did the hard work on the front.
And it's really hard for teachers to speak out on this issue when they're not protected because they could be fired. So it makes perfect sense that people weren't ready to do that. But we were able to pass this policy in February, and just a couple weeks ago, we heard that there's a teacher in Loudoun who now feels protected enough to actually live their authentic life and is going to be, going full time. And we're just like so excited that some words on a piece of paper have liberated this person and to live their life.
We have some friends and non-binary teachers in Fairfax who are transitioned at work and are living authentically, and because we have protection.
Yeah.
And we had people come from, that were coming and speaking to us who were saying, I've decided I can't apply for a job here because it can't protect me. And so, yeah, I heard that same thing that that a transgender woman has decided that she's going to transition. So.
In our school, when we passed the non-discrimination policy, there was teachers I didn't know were LGBTQ until after it passed. It came out, and I was like, "Well, where have you been? We could have been partying together, But because they knew they were protected and weren't going to lose their job, they felt safe enough to come out themselves. How exciting and sad at the same time that they had to wait so long to come out. When our youth are now being more comfortable coming out, but us adults still have to stay in the closet.
Teachers need implementation from the staff, because from a teacher's point of view, the thing you're most vulnerable to are parent complaints. And teachers are fearful of being hauled in front of their administrators by parents. So what's happened in Fairfax is happening, hasn't happened completely. It's word from the superintendent down that we back our LGBTQ teachers, which hasn't been always been true. And that's from a teacher's point of view. That's your biggest fear. Is what if there's an email about it? What if I have to go to a meeting and defend myself?
Well, we know once teachers do feel protected and policies actually in place, and it's very upfront about it, then they're going to be able to be more visible for the students. So there's kind of a trickle-down effect. So once you protect the teachers, they can be more accessible to the students. And in Loudoun, once we passed our policy, we thought, how can we make these words on paper seem real to students? And we reached out to every librarian at LCPS and said, would you like to receive free LGBT affirming inclusive books? And we had 32 librarians say yes, and they requested over 750 books from elementary all the way up to high school. And we're hoping, LGBT kids will read this, but so will their classmates, so will the teachers. So we want everyone to have access to these books so that they can understand what these kids are going through, and hopefully have conversations with their friends and their family, because there is a lack of education, especially around trans rights, that's really hard for some people to get their mind around it. So if you Google the hashtag Big Gay Book Drive, you can find our list, and it's age-appropriate material going through all of the grade levels. So I was really proud that we were able to do that. And we're already hearing from students that they're seeing themselves reflected in these stories for the first time in their lives. So it's only been a couple months, and it's already having a big impact. So
librarians are your allies. Librarians love kids. They talk about windows and mirrors. They love kids. They love all kids. And librarians are my heroes.
Yeah, and if you want to pass these policies, you need to know who your allies are. So you need to know who your allies are on the school board, in the schools, but also the community organizations. Like Robert mentioned, we reached out to the NAACP. Equality Virginia also has a list of LGBT affirming churches. And you can go online, contact those churches in your area, and work with them to try and bring people out. And we had a number of faith leaders speak at our school board meeting in support of this policy change.
One group I left out was the Fairfax County Council of PTAs. our countywide PTA council have become. They didn't even know they were allies until there was a need for them to be allies, and they've become tremendous allies. So we'll be doing a forum or a forum with the Fairfax County Council PTAs this fall and next spring to bring together dozens, scores of people in the community to talk about LGBTQ kids and teachers.
And if you have a PTA, like the statewide Virginia PTA, they do support this. So you can get documents from them that show your support that you can send to your school board reps, and meeting with them one-on-one can be huge. I met with one of our school board reps who was not an ally, and she took the time to speak with me for an hour, but I walked out of that meeting and sat in my car and cried because I just couldn't understand why she was going to be this way. Like, there was no way I could change her mind. And it can be very exhausting. And just being in these school board meetings and hearing the opposition say lies, you know, spout GOP talking points, it does take a toll on you, but also the kids. You know, kids are listening to this, and it does have a negative impact on their mental health, and they're already at a high rate for suicide. So it's just something you need to be cognizant of, and then you have to like come back in and check in with them. So this past Tuesday night, we were at the Leesburg Town Council talking about this issue over a Pride proclamation, and there was one young person who signed up to speak and was there and didn't speak. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, are you okay? He was just like, I was too nervous, you know, I couldn't do it. I'm like, okay, take care of yourself. So it's important to do those check-ins.
And let me add that some of the local shelters, because they do take in a lot of homeless LGBTQ youth, can be your biggest allies and advocates as well. I got in contact and started working with ACTS. I don't know if any of you know what ACTS is, but in Princeton County, they do a lot of services for shelter, for food, and for healthcare for everybody that becomes homeless in the county. But they wanted to work specifically with the LGBTQ youth, and I got them to write a statement to help to present to the Board of County Supervisors for the proclamation to proclaim June as LGBTQ Pride Month. They can also advocate on the end of what they're seeing and what they're experiencing and what their role is at the school boards too, and why it's so important to be inclusive in their policies.
And really, I mean, we're talking about the local level because that's where we can make change. But right now, there's been, I think 4 years now, the Senate has passed a law saying that, the Virginia State Senate, saying that you can't discriminate in public employment.
And housing.
In housing for sexual orientation or gender identity, and it can't get out of committee in the House. So if we can just change enough state House members, similar to what we did on the Loudoun County School Board, you know, it's just, you know, 1 or 2 seats that you need to change. Same thing, you know, my new representative in Congress, Jennifer Wexton, spearheaded the Equality Act that was passed in the House. It's the federal House now. And so that one, again, they don't think has a chance in the Senate. But if, you know, the Senate changes, then we could just have a federal law that says that you can't discriminate on either of those bases, and then we wouldn't have to worry about these local issues.
In the Virginia House, the votes are there. It's being sought by one man, Kirk Collins. If we take 1 more seat, 2 more seats, we get to elect our own, what do you call it, speaker, and then it'll come out of committee, and then it will pass. And then the school systems won't be under threat for lawsuits, because we're all under threats for lawsuits.
So elections really matter, and a lot of school board reps. Yes. We're electing our school board reps in Loudoun County, and we're asking them questions on these issues. So Equality Loudoun created a candidate scorecard and sent it to every candidate running in Loudoun. We didn't hear from any Republicans. We heard from 1 independent, And we heard from most Democrats, but there were a number of people who didn't complete it. And I think in particular, school board, people running for school board, they really don't want to be pressed on these issues because they are controversial, but we need to know where people stand on these. So if you go to a candidate forum, ask questions about this issue, because we saw last year with the 6-way primary we had for Congress is no one was asking questions about LGBT rights. So it is important that we are in the room bringing up these issues because they are more than happy to ignore them. I hope that didn't sound too mean, but one of the other things is there are a lot of statistics out there, and PFLAG, they have a lot of information on their website, and there's like a GLSEN school survey. But the thing that I have found has the most impact are just personal stories. So if you can get in that room and you're brave enough to speak, and yes, I spoke like once a month for 2 years, but every time I felt like I was having a heart attack, you know, like it is very nerve-wracking, and it's not for everyone. But I've been in that school board room where an 8th grader was like, I am a lesbian, and had no qualms and really shared her story and her experience. And I know most school board reps, they really care about the issue of youth suicide because it really has become massive. And if anyone cares about reducing suicide risk for youth, then they need to care about this issue. And we need to have affirming policies, and we need GSAs, because a study just came out that just having a GSA reduces the suicide risk for LGBT students. So why wouldn't you want to do that? So that's a huge part of it. One thing that Evelyn talked about was wearing purple. So having a unifying color in the room.
Purple is the color.
Purple is the color we did in Loudoun. And it was great for us in the audience to see school board members wearing purple or, you know, rainbows. And we had like rainbow lapel pins that we handed out and made sure that people who wanted to be visible could be visible. And a lot of the teachers wanted to wear those ribbons on their lanyards, and having just those little things in the school sends a message to everyone that they are an ally. So yeah.
We give our kids little rainbows to put on the backs of their friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my daughter's teacher in high school had the HRC equality symbol on his door. So it's like little things like that. Just
It makes all the difference.
Pointed out to the kids.
At home duty last month, the boy came up to me and said, Mr. Rigby, what's with all the rainbows? I said, what do you mean? He said, everyone has rainbows. What's it mean? I said, it stands for fairness and equality. He said, cool.
Right.
And then I took him to class late.
Yeah. So one thing is persistence. You know, you can't let it go. Even if the vote goes down and it doesn't go your way, don't give up. You just have to find some people and keep going. And I remember after, I guess it was January or February of 2017, after the Loudoun County School Board voted against these policies, I was like, I'm still going back. And I went back, and I was the only one speaking in support of this. And I was like, I can't do this alone. So I found people who could be there with me. And really, we just kept speaking about the issue, bringing attention to it, and found the other organizations who would support us. And once we were getting close to having a vote, you know, we rallied people to show up. And depending on where you are in Virginia, that might be a difficult thing. But if you reach out to other organizations, Equality Virginia wanted to do work on this particular subject, but they just couldn't get the funding for it. And they're having a hard enough time with the General Assembly that, you know, they can't do everything, even though that would be wonderful.
I'll echo what Charlotte said. You get exhausted doing this on your own. You can't do it on your own. Organization and structure. FCPS Pride is an organization with bylaws and board and Facebook and structure and volunteers. And so you see me a lot because I like to talk and I like to be on the news. But we've got a whole board of people and volunteers who do outreach and go to meetings and puzzle over problems and strategize. And I can't emphasize enough that before you go out and start advocating publicly, build a structure, build networks.
Yeah. So I'm going to recap really the points. If you want to do this work at your school board, persistence. Build a large coalition. Share statistics, but personal stories are really going to have the biggest impact. Wear a unifying color, signs help, especially if there's going to be any kind of media in the room. You want them to have a great image. The rally we did Tuesday night, there's this great sign of one of our members holding a resign sign and then 3 members in the back holding pride flags. Like, it's just such a strong image. Elections matter. Get involved in them. Remind your neighbors. Press the candidates. Know your school's policy and the policy for your local government. So we were in Loudoun our Loudoun County government had these protections in place for their employees. So it's like, this seems like a no-brainer, but 2 years later. And just know the procedure for giving public comment, because you do want to be respectful in that room. Where we are in Loudoun, you couldn't clap, so we would have to do this. And it's like a hard habit for me to break sometimes, where I'm like, yeah! So just getting to know what the policy is and sharing that information with other people. So does anyone have any questions? Yes, in the back of the white shirt?
Oh, sorry. We're actually from rural Southern Virginia.
I'm running for House District 60, so
Yeah.
And I'm the type of person, I'm a teacher, and so I'm not out to my students, unfortunately, because I'm not sure what will happen. I work in the juvenile detention center, so I've got kids who are extremely homophobic, but I've stopped the "that's so gay" comments, and just because I have friends who are gay, many of them hanging on my wall behind my desk, they're my best friends, my 2 gay boyfriends, I like to call them. But I'm out as much as I can be in stopping the bullying and things like that, because we have a transgender kiddo in detention right now, and she can't be out, and she has a full beard right now and is treated like a boy and is in with the boys, and it's pretty sad. So I'm hoping that this kiddo makes it okay being in that situation. But anyhow, so I'm running to try to help. And what was that?
She's did so much for us.
Yeah, it's tough, but yeah. So anyhow, just letting you know that there is someone running for House District 60, Southern Virginia, Charlotte County. I'm sure there's not a lot of policies in Charlotte County that are very pro-equality, but I'm trying to change that. So.
What's your name? I'll donate.
Jamie Zimmerman. I'll give you a card if you want a card.
Wonderful, and we are recording this.
All right, there we go.
If you want us to cut that short, we certainly can, because I don't want. Okay, wonderful.
It's fine if it gets I've told my transgender student, he knows. She knows, but it's so hard because we have to just go with the male there. She knows about it, and so far is one of the most gossipy kiddos and hasn't actually shared my story. That's how I've told most kids. I've told one, and I let them tell each other, and then the rumor gets out, and then other people find out, but it wasn't me who told anybody. So that's usually I'll tell a few kids I trust, and so far it's gotten out every school I've worked at eventually. But so far it hasn't there. I'm kind of shocked. Okay. So yeah, I don't mind.
Great, thanks.
Well, actually, I did have a question.
I jumped in.
Now you know why she's running for office. I guess my question is, I like this idea you talked about with the books from the libraries and going to librarians, because put yourself in a rural red area. And there are several kids in our community, and a lot of the teachers in our area are Democrats who are open-minded and more liberal, but they're afraid to say that because of the repercussions from the good old boy network in the county, which in our county affects everything from your bank loans to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if there's a way to get a group together that could provide maybe pins for teachers.
Sure.
A subtle thing, and books to the librarians. Mm-hmm. That all kids have the same chance to at least understand and have maybe a source to go to that they can talk to privately if they need it.
I think the first thing that you should do is find a friendly librarian in the school and ask them, like, what is your policy? How do you get the books into your library? Because that was my first step. I found out exactly what the policy was, and I said, okay, so it's pretty much up to the librarians to select what they want to offer in their library. And I created a list and sent it to the librarians so they could pick what books they wanted. So it wasn't that I'm just sending this to you, because those librarians, they know the kids, they know the atmosphere. And it can start very subtly. I know 2 years ago, I gave a copy of I Am Jazz to, my son was in kindergarten. I gave it to his school librarian and later found out that it was just in the guidance counselor's office. Like, they didn't actually put it out for distribution. But fast forward to now, she signed up for books that will be in the library and accessible to kids. So GLSEN, are you aware of the organization GLSEN?
No.
So they're wonderful. They do a lot of resources. They will mail you resources.
GLSEN.
GLSEN. I have the Richmond pin, so.
Yeah, it's the like Gay, Lesbian, Student Education. Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. And if there's not a PFLAG chapter in your area, you could ask around for support, but even reach out to PFLAG and be like, this is something we need in our community. We don't have one. Are there any resources? You know, just start reaching out to other organizations. Try and reach out. Do you have public libraries in your area that are?
They're very small, but yes, and most of the books they have are donated in our area.
Okay.
So that
Are you
gives
in
you a little
South Side or Southwest Virginia?
South Central Virginia.
Richmond has a very articulated, well-developed, and well-funded LGBTQ social service organization for children, currently called Side by Side. Side by Side. And as in terms of local action and local resources, Richmond's what, a 40-minute drive?
From me, about an hour and
4 ways.
But that's okay. I mean,
I know about Side by Side.
Yeah.
Talk to me in August, because I just applied for a Roddenberry Fellowship, and if I win this, I'll get $50,000 to provide LGBT inclusive affirming books to school districts. So my end goal is basically every school district who wants these books will get $5,000 worth of books into their library. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, we have several small libraries, but even if it was at one, that the kids could access it, you know what I mean? That there's something for them to go to.
If you could do an event at your library, like in a Rainbow Read story hour, because they take place in Loudoun, and it is hard to get people to show up for them. Like, people are really scared, and when this is advertised, and we just saw that there was like a storybook Pride prom down in Florida that was being held at a library, and they got bombarded by haters, and they had to shut the whole thing down. So whenever you're doing this kind of work, you will be made a target, and it's unfortunate. We had this woman showing up at the Loudoun school board meetings who has a blog, and she was like doxing people, and she took something I had said during a meeting and line for line just like argued every bit of what I had to say. So it is going to be.
You're right. Library collections are a safe space. Librarians have standards for books they can admit. Usually, it's that it has to be in 2 youth literary journals. All of these books, there are dozens, scores, maybe hundreds of LGBTQ books in all of these library journals. So they'll pass the standards that your librarians have to meet. And like you say, if it's in the collection, kids can look up trans in the Dewey Decimal System, and it pops up. So you don't have to do a drag queen reading hour and become a target if your community's not ready for that. But you can have them in the collection.
I was just say also be careful, because the superintendent, like what happened in Princeton County, blocked a lot of LGBTQ websites online for our high school kids. They couldn't look up GLSEN, they couldn't look up Trevor Project, they couldn't look up a PFLAG because it was LGBTQ, and he deemed it, inappropriate. Yes, he did. So you got to be careful, check what the policies are at the school, because if they can't use the website at school when they're at school to look up for resources, then the public gun library is basically the next step.
But like the NEA is on our side in this issue, since it's Pride Month, they like just released you know, something with stories from educators and sharing that with people in your school district or even the library to kind of help build that support. So it just really takes time and persistence and having those conversations.
More locally
just to point out, in Loudon, you know, I don't remember the year now, but and Tango Makes Three was in a library in our elementary school, and somebody complained, and the superintendent pulled it, and then it became public that this happened, and there was a big to-do, and it ended up that, yes, it was not going to be available for general circulation, that it would only be available if it was asked for. And this was before I was on the school board, but it wasn't that much long before, I don't think.
I remember
and so, like, you guys remember it, right?
remember that.
Yeah, so if you think about that from then to now,
And that's one of the titles on our Big Gay Book Drive. So
now librarians are requesting these books.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, and we have our assistant superintendent going on record when if somebody complained to them, you know, that no, this is totally fine. Like we're fine with this. And so that's how fast, you know, things can turn around for you. You know, as much as it maybe seems daunting now.
we're running out of time. I'm more than happy to speak with you after this, and I'll make sure that you have my card. Are there any closing comments? Anything you wanted to say that didn't?
School clubs, gender and sexuality alliances, gay straight alliances, or if not that, diversity clubs, equity clubs, allied clubs, places for children to gather and be in one another's company make all the difference.
Another thing I want to say is get involved in your local PTA group, because it wasn't until my wife and I got involved that we actually started changing some minds at school. So if majority of the time, the only way that you're going to get your issues heard is if you get involved. So always talk to the school board is not going to be the only way of action. Get involved in the school, PTSAs, PTAs, also outside organizations that help children too, like with reading organizations and after school programs and Boys and Girls Club. Have an LGBTQ presence, wear your LGBTQ sticker or button, something like that. Let them know that you're here as a resource as well, and that can change the narrative in the schools.
I'll put in a plug too for the Unitarian Universalist and the United Church of Christ as a sex ed curriculum called Our Whole Lives, and if you can find a local church that offers that, then you can have your child attend.
There's still a lot of work left to do, even though we've passed these policies. LGBT kids aren't included in family life education, and that's kind of our next frontier because that's a public health issue, you know? They need to be included. So I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you all for joining me tonight, and I will be sure that you have my card, so thanks.
So I'm the mother of a transgender son who graduated from high school in 2014, and that's when he began transitioning in his and how he was expressing his gender, and so it was definitely not supportive. I saw how it was for him, and then he wasn't alone. There were other friends of his who were LGBTQ students who were feeling unheard. And our public schools are there to be for all students, not just for students that certain segments of a community or a district feel comfortable around. The ESCA is a civil rights law, and it's there to make sure that there are equitable opportunities for all students, and so that includes LGBTQ students. So it's particularly egregious that they go to a place that they have a right to be at and are made to feel unwelcome when they're just they're trying to get an education like everybody else and be a productive part of their community and of society. So just seeing what my own son went through and knowing that he's not alone.
I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. For 22 years, I've sponsored gender and sexuality alliances at my school. I've come to know over the last few years many parents of transgender students and many transgender and LGBTQ members of the community. This group needs representation in our public arena, support from our public officials.
So I was running the Brentsville Magisterial District precinct for Election Day. So I had 12 polling locations that I was in charge of. And my daughter had a friend, and they were working one of the locations. They were passing out sample ballots. We, of course, were helping out Danica Rome get elected. We were part of her campaign donors, and we were in her print ad and also in her television ad. We just love that woman. So when I was coming back from checking from another location, I noticed that my daughter wasn't where she was supposed to be, and that she was alone, and that she was backed up into a corner and surrounded by 4 women. As I got closer, I could hear that they were yelling at her and using profanity. And so I ran and jumped in between these 4 women and my daughter with my back against my daughter's face, and then my arms stretched out. And I kept yelling, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what's going on?" And that's when I realized that my supervisor for the Board of County Supervisors in the Brentsville District, Janine Lawson, cornered and bullied my daughter because she had 2 mothers. And so that made me activate my passion even more than I was before to be such a warrior for LGBTQ people and for our issues for equality.
Well, I am bisexual, and I remember growing up hearing horrible things being said about me. I woke up one morning, came out to my car, and someone had written faggot across the back of my car, and like they totally misspelled it. Like, oh no, it was lesbian that they misspelled. That was, yes, because lesbian should have a Z, right? And once I have 2 kids, they're 8 and 4. And when my oldest was going into kindergarten, I became active in the school. And it was in November of 2016 that I heard about passing gender identity and sexual orientation in the employee non-discrimination policy. And I started getting involved speaking, and I just kept doing it. And now I'm one of the steering committee members for Equality Loudoun, and we're just really trying to make Loudoun County more LGBT affirming and create community for our LGBT people and allies in our county.
Because I think everybody should have equal rights. I definitely believe that students who are LGBTQ are hiding in the shadows. I know there's students out there that are LGBTQ, even in the southern Charlotte County and southern Virginia, rural Virginia, but they don't have a right to speak out because they're all hiding. And so I want to make sure that things are fair, and teachers and students and other people can speak out and be open and out, and people can be affirming to LGBTQI people.